Hi, Nick here from Gibbins Richards Estate Agents, independent estate agents in Somerset, covering Taunton, Bridgewater, Burnham-on-Sea, Wiveliscombe, and here, Wellington. Now, whether you're a fan of them or not, the subject of new homes seems to dominate our towns across the nation. It seems that wherever you live, you're never far away from the talk about or the reality of a new development cropping up very close to where you live. But this is interesting because we've looked at the housing history of one of our towns, Wellington, which is a small town of about 15,000 population located just off the M5. And it's really interesting to see how much or how little, depending on how you view it, the housing history has changed over the last 150 years. So with the help of local historian Colin Spackman from Wellington Museum, we've broken the town's history into 35-year periods starting with the Georgian era. And it's really interesting to see just how consistent the development spread has been over those years. And also with the help of Lindsay Birch at design company 815 Design, based here in town, we've created a map. Now, as it's a residential map, we're going to first take away the commercial, educational and industrial parts of the town. Okay, so starting with the centre of Wellington, we've got a main crossroads with South Street, North Street, 4th Street and the High Street, all of which have a dense cluster of Georgian houses, so mainly anything between 1800 and about 1880. You can tell from their distinctive Georgian architecture, and of course many towns around the UK have got a centre of town just like this. Then of course, with the arrival and increased productivity of the Fox's Woolen Mill down at Tonedale, the north side of town grew considerably, and a whole new wave of residential development was increasing between about 1880 and 1915. So at about 1915 to the end of the Second World War, to about 1950, a whole new swathe of development for residential housing was built to the south of town and some of the more local authority areas to the north of town, which of course provided much needed social housing, especially after the war. So the next period, 1950 to about 1985, saw perhaps the biggest growth yet in Wellington, mainly around the Barmeads areas and the Beach Hill area, both of which are south of town. And this continued residential development, of course, coincided with the opening in the late 70s of the M5 motorway, which of course made Wellington more accessible than ever up to that point. So the last period, 1985 till the present day, shows even more growth, but generally not restricted at any particular area. It was all across the town. For example, here at Dobery Park at Rockwell Green, down at Tonedale, Weaver's Reach and Millstream Gardens, and of course the boroughs. So developments at Cades Farm, Longforth Farm, Jurston Fields and Bagley Road are all perhaps a bit more noticeable due to their prominence as you drive into the towns from the various routes. And of course, with all the development in the town over the last 150 years or so, it's still worth remembering just how much protected green space is still around all over the town. So there we have it, a very brief and very general overview of the town's growth history over the last century and a half. And of course, most towns across the UK have got a very similar growth pattern to this. But what's really interesting after analysing all of these facts and figures over the last 150 years is the fact that the population of Wellington hasn't actually grown that much. 100 years ago, in about 1915, the population of the town was 7,500. In 2020, it was about 15,000. So in 100 years, it's just doubled. And remember that 100 years ago, there were perhaps many more family members living in smaller houses, whereas today, fewer people live in bigger houses, so fewer people are taking up more square footage, which would illustrate why the town seems to have grown more than twice its size in 100 years, yet the population has only doubled. Now, we hope you found this little video interesting and informative, but please bear in mind that all dates, ages, figures and facts are all very general and very approximate. Thanks a lot.